Good day to you one and all. It is I, Justin Hawkins, and this is Justin Hawkins Rides Again. Following on from the episode I recently did talking about the rock is dead debate, there is a new genre of rock emerging right now. It's called NuGen. So this episode is me talking about that. Can't wait to get stuck into it. It's exciting when something new comes along, is it? Justin Hawkins Rides Justin Hawkins Rides Again. So earlier this year, the rapper turned punk rocker Machine Gun Kelly suggested that before his arrival on the scene, the genre had been in need of a defibrillator. And Kiss's Gene Simmons recently reasserted his 2014 statement, declaring in an interview with Metal Hammer, "I stand by my words, rock is dead." He probably didn't say it in that sort of fruity British theatre actor voice, but, you know, he probably should have. There is a new generation of artists who have torn the conventions of the genre as we once knew it to shreds. Not shreds, as in, you know. They're dismantling rock's best qualities, and they've formed a new hybrid from its constituent parts, merging metal with emo, pop, R&B. It seems to be solo singer-songwriters rather than bands propelling the genre into the mainstream. And I wonder why that is. Is it because I think if you have a collective and you're looking for common ground when you're standing in a rehearsal space and you're working on new material, the one thing that unites us all as enthusiasts of guitar music is this. The love of the riff. The love of the riff. Or, I love riffs. I really love hearing riff. I really love playing riffs. That's, you know, every guitar player in the world who loves guitar loves playing riffs. They're just brilliant fun. Some of the front runners waving the flag for the new gen scene include Mothica, who writes emo-inspired, magnificently moody pop, and Cassyette, which is it merges rock, emo, and pop in a black lipstick smudged stain, and she labels grit pop. And then there's a band called Sick Brain with 3 eyes in it. I wonder if that means the 2 eyes traditionally used for seeing and judging, you know, depth perception and all that, and also the 3rd eye, which I think is around there somewhere, isn't it? Which, I don't know, people who are into esoteric stuff think is a source of wisdom viewing. Well, I don't know what that's for, to be honest. One of my exes used to go on about it. It fucking drove me mad. No, it didn't. I respected it. NuGen is also doing a lot for representation in the scene, kicking in the doors of rock's historically misogynistic boys club, courtesy of a cohort of non-binary and LGBTQ+ artists. That might be another reason why the older rockers don't like it. Some people don't like change or even being asked to accept change. But hasn't sexuality and sex always been part of rock and roll? You know, the androgyny, isn't that the whole thing? That's the reason why I think it's one of the reasons why people love David Bowie, for example, Bowie. If you think about, like, for example, the whole aesthetic of rock, and as it's, you know, developed and emerged and evolved over the years, I think the sexuality and the sex part, it's always been front and center, you know, from the 80s with the skin-tight spandex, as the Americans call it, lycra, as we call it here in the UK, famously augmenting the frontal region with various different vegetables and stuff. That's both Bad Taste and Spinal Tap did jokes about that. So why shouldn't they flaunt their version of sexuality and sex, you know? Things have changed, but not that much, I don't think. So here's a case study. We're going to talk about Cassyette. It's a really exciting time because where there's more diversity, there's better music, and it's only going to make these sounds more futuristic. Rock is becoming redefined. I think that's the point I was making in the previous episode about rock being dead. I think that's actually what needs to happen to it. You need a cleansing fire to come and wash away all of the stuff that embodies the attitudes that aren't really acceptable or prevalent anymore. Even in the alternative, it's like change has to come, and it has to come from somewhere. Maybe it's rock. Maybe rock can be the catalyst for that. She grew up listening to Paramore, Korn, Black Sabbath and Motley Crue from the age of 13, but soon found herself venturing away from her teenage heroes once her DJing career took off. She believes that this scene's approach to blending styles is the secret to lengthening rock's shelf life. And I've said this like 5 or 6 times in previous episodes. It has always been the dream and the goal for prevailing rock musicians du jour to try and combine elements of guitar-based rock music with electronic stuff, and it really hasn't been an easy ride. As soon as, for example, do you remember Slade? Like Slade, quintessential English glam rock band with the brilliant Christmas song, Come On Feel the Noise, all these great hits. And then in the 80s, they start introducing things like synthesizers and arpeggios and, electronic elements. The way I wouldn't say they fused dance music insofar as the sound of it really, but there was something much more hi-fi about the approach to recording the drums, for example. They had a song called Radio, wall of sound coming up through your tower, 24 hours of power. And then it would be sort of interspersed with all this kind of voice acting in the style of a radio DJ going, and now next up on KR, whatever the radio station is, we got Slade and they're doing some rock and roll music. And it was always just like much more of an involved kind of electronic inspired production. But Slade fans, they may well have rejected it. What about Status Quo? Famously, renowned for this. That was kind of like their raison d'etre, their modus operandi. Next thing you know, in the 80s, they're doing, oh, we're in the army now. And it all has do-do-do-do, all this sort of synthesizer stuff going on. So people have been trying to drag rock into these other avenues to try and, embrace the electronic elements. They've been doing it since the 80s, maybe even before then. There's probably some rock stuff that was trying to, bring in elements of disco, but we don't talk about that. Let's have a look at Cassyette's Sad Girl Summer. I'm a mess, I'm depressed in my dress from the night before. So it has like this, it's a programmed drum beat. You can hear it in the way that like the second kick drum has a different sort of tonal quality to it, but it's every second and fourth, so it's not just because of the way that the drum is hitting the thing, it's actually a sample or a collection of samples. Hang on. I'm a mess, I'm depressed in my dress. So it has that cool passing note there where you've still got the C, but it's an E going into the F, if you see what I mean. So the root is an E and then it goes to an F. I love chords like that anyway, so it sort of stops it from being a power chord and makes your ears pop up and go, oh, that's posh. And it sounds like it's a sample of a guitar. So essentially it is a guitar, but then it's so clipped at the beginning and the end, you're sort of missing some of the attack that you traditionally get, or the slide in with a plectrum sound coming across the strings. And it's really clipped at the end as well, so it's like, it's cut off, so you don't get the sort of string sound of somebody moving their hand. Like, so the effect of it is much more like a person triggering samples on a keyboard. And in fact, that might actually be what it is, You can do that by mapping like a power chord to every note on a keyboard, and then you just have to go this. I mean, maybe that's how they did it. I don't know. Or they might have just had somebody play it and then clip it. But it's basically taking a stringed instrument and making it behave like an electronic element. And also, the same thing's happening with the drums. That's a live drum set, sampled, cut up, and each individual element of the drum set is being triggered individually to make that beat. Got out of my head 'cause you left, now my heart is torn. But it's a really nice, intimate kind of vocal performance. Every day, every night, there's a fight, kick me to the core. Every day, every night. That's actually a really nice melody, that is, because it sort of has this, which is the major seventh of the key she's operating in, so it's nice, that is. Instead of just going for the root, going for the major seventh is a bit posh. Makes your ears pop up. I'm a mess, I'm depressed in my dress from the night before. And she's got a little bit of pinkness about her vocal, don't you think? Pieces, give me one more minute, give me one more minute, 'cause you keep making me mad, yeah, right, and here's where it sounds like the guitar. There's guitars in there, but I think there's something augmenting that's probably synthy, like a much more of a sort of polysynth pad happening in combination with like a rolling bass and some power chords, really. So I mean, I feel like this, with the way the dynamics have increased on the chorus, you're basically looking at, you know, a rock song in the traditional structure, perhaps with some 90s influence in the way it gets loud in the chorus, you know. But actually, the way they've achieved it is electronic, and that's audible, and they haven't tried to hide that. But I'm not really hearing any sort of, you know, dance music elements or synthesizers at the fore. This is, you'd have to say this is rock music, but just modern. And then there's a drum fill that sounded like it was actually played by a human. And then the chords are changing behind that. Let me just see what that is. So the chords are changing, but the refrain remains the same. What's that called again, kids? It's an ostinato! Oh no, wait, sorry. It's an ostinato! We live in the age of the ostinato. I told you. Okay, now there's some electronics like pew 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 pew, like some filtered synthesizer stuff hitting that little bit there. Forget what you said in my bed from the night before. And then there's I think that there is some synth stuff happening now in the second verse and onwards, but I feel like it's definitely in the periphery. It's the kind of thing you'd probably hear, you know, more established bands using as an effect. I know we've sort of experimented with things like that and then just promptly deleted it because there's no way we can do it live. I don't know what she's like live, actually. I've never had the pleasure, but maybe there's some sort of pre-recorded elements to it, and you know, that's probably a thing that puts off like enthusiasts of heritage and legacy rock when it comes to this new gen, because I don't know, for me it's like if you go to a gig, there's nothing more exciting than some people on stage who are just playing with no sort of metronomical or pre-recorded parts, and you know, nothing to guide them except their hearts and the audience and reading the room, and the excitement and the adrenaline of it determines the pace of the songs and so on. And you always try and aim for the same tempo, but you never get the same thing twice, and that's what's great about old-fashioned rock music. But at the same time, there's something about the attitude of this that's you know, to achieve that actual power and to get people smashed in the face in the way that this chorus probably smashes you in the face live. It's like you're going to need to have stuff recorded, and I see it all the time in bands that have only like they've been going since the 80s. You know, like there are certain bands from that period that have always used like pre-recorded elements on what used to be the ADAT machine, which was like a multi-track digital recording device that had the same sort of sample rate as CDs and beyond. And then you'd have like DAT players with stuff on it. Yeah, and then full-on bands with laptops on stage. It does happen. You see it all the time, actually. I mean, quite aside from, you know, using things like amp simulators and so on, there would actually be computers on stage in some instances. And that, I'm talking about bands that go back as far as the 80s. It's just the way some people need that crutch, you know, or the things that they really want to pull off for their audience. They can't do it without that. But this is building it like that from the ground up. I'd love to hear this played by like a band in the most traditional sense, really, because it isn't a bad song, you know.
Could you hit up your ex with the text and the dirty talk?
That
How could you hit up your ex with the text?
that's kind of got something policey about it, hasn't it? Like, Don't Stand So Close to Me, the reimagining. Again, look at that, Police, Whitesnake. They had these songs in the 70s that were brilliant, and then some of them were sort of, you know, there's probably some contractual reasons why you would want to, you know, give your catalogue a little kick in the balls at some point, you know, after having been locked into somebody else owning your masters for a long time. Then you get an opportunity when that's done and dusted to re-record it and own the master yourself. So sometimes people do that. Like the Police redid Don't Stand So Close to Me, you know, which is a sentiment that really does need to be heard twice. But the second one was really 80s and sounded totally different. Look, had lots more synthesizer elements to it. And the same thing happened with Whitesnake. They re-recorded Here I Go Again. He changed one of the lyrics. He changed a lyric that we used to say hobo. He changed it to drifter. And I think, you know, there's probably... I would hate to imagine that there was any sort of homophobia involved in that, because hobo can sound a little bit like homo, depending on whether you're got blocked up does or not. I don't know why it was changed, but anyway, for whatever reason they did that. But also they arranged the re-records in a really sort of its time way, so it had proper synthesizers and stuff. Perhaps my producer would like to put a clip of each to show you the difference. So here's the bit where it fully goes into an electronic arrangement.
I don't wanna be a sad girl anymore.
It's really interesting though, because listen to that drum sound, and then it suddenly stops. That's like a gated. You can achieve that with a gated reverb. Even people like Phil Collins were doing that since the 70s. Actually, that's not a new effect, really. I think the way they've achieved it might be slightly different, because it probably does involve a really harsh trim on a Pro Tools file. You know, it's probably like a big, recorded with a huge amount of reverb. So the snare, instead of going, which is what a snare actually sounds like, it has a lot of reverberation effect on it. So it goes, and then you cut it off exactly on the next bar. So it goes. In a slightly different way, Genesis and Phil Collins was doing that years and decades ago. So it's an evolution, but it's only a subtle one, really. And I think really the only difference is in the way that these effects are actually achieved, you know, in terms of the actual process that you go through to get those sounds.
I don't wanna be a sad girl anymore.
But regardless of what the electronic elements are, when the chorus kicks in, it just sounds like a band, which shows you that in its heart this is a rock song, really, and then the other stuff is designed to create tension, and then the relief is the refrain, the chorus. And a really cool C section, not the Caesarean, I'm not talking about that, with the descending chord pattern and ostinato that I mentioned before. I like choruses that are two-parters like that, but it is actually something that came from the pop world, really, because you'd have like a refrain, and then as a sort of segment before the second or third verse started, you would have like a post-chorus chant or some sort of refrain or music, some sort of interlude that isn't really. It's the post. You have a pre-chorus, a post-chorus. In a lot of rock music, it would be a guitar solo at that point, or a little bit of lead work, a little lead break, they'd call it. But I think that's where the pop has informed this. All right. So, apart from massive guitar solo, you are looking at a rock song. It's just like the way they've achieved those things. The process is just slightly different, I think. And that is part of the evolution, isn't it? The way people make records changes. It's determined by budgetary constraints. So anyway, using Cassyette as a case study, I suppose it's evident that a lot of the elements of rock remain, and even though this is a sort of deconstructed rock, I don't even know if I'd agree with that, really. I just think it's been realised using different techniques. In this instance, the Sad Girl Summer. I'll listen to more of their stuff, and I'll probably come back to Cassyette at a later date and see what they've been up to. But yeah, it's like NuGen. It just sounds like it just needs a guitar solo, and then it's old gen, but done on a laptop. Justin Hawkins writes again, and that is in no way intended as a negative criticism. Again, I think it just shows you that there's hope. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, watch one of these 2 videos, and fear not. We're on the rise, my friends. We are on the rise. Rise.